Hey everyone, welcome to Shunya 1 episode 147. How's it going, Amit? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's been quite a week for me. I went to your hometown, as you might say, or your ex hometown, or whatever you'd like to call it.
Well,
Your
that
hometown.
for well, if I know you mean Bangalore,
Yes.
and well, it's officially not my hometown, although it was my most frequented city when I used to
it
take flights.
it felt to me like you were in Bangalore more than you were in Bombay, more often than not.
I could probably average out the days in the year, and it might have been like
Y-
that. So,
I,
yeah.
I remember that one time when we went together, you actually knew where shit was in Bangalore. I have no idea where anything is, right? I mean, like I sit in a cab and I put a location and I go wherever the guy takes me. You actually knew that no, we need to go here, and no, you need to go on this flyover. Why are you not going on this flyover? That was kind
Oh
of interesting
man.
to me.
The days when I travel again. We'll see. We'll
Yes,
see
yes,
when that
yes.
happens.
Yes.
But yeah, good week, fun week. I mean, for me, it was pretty much the same, just sitting in Bombay, getting bored of the rains. But I'm glad we have a good, very interesting conversation coming up.
A different one, right? I mean, like again, I mean, like
Yeah,
we've done a few Bharat conversations, I guess, India versus Bharat conversations,
right,
but I
right.
thought this was like from a lot of the fintechs that we've spoken about, there is a very clearly different bent that these people are taking in terms of how they're approaching the business or how they're
Yeah, and
approaching the
also,
space.
it's one of the older sort of fintechs
Hmm.
doing lending before lending was a feature. We're obviously talking to Rohit Garg, the co-founder and CEO of SmartCoin, and SmartCoin is a very interesting app that's been around for a long time, actually. In the very first wave of sort of fintech starting out in India, well before all the other cool stuff that we hear about on this show from other folks
Yeah.
actually showed up.
Hmm. No, I was really impressed with the conversation, right? And I mean, like, some of it was really eye-opening as well, right? In terms of the value of the loans that people are like, that are
Yeah.
life-changing, right? I mean, like, it was really interesting, and it's very cool to me that like, somebody is getting into rural lending and being able to provide financial instruments at
Yeah.
interest rates which are not basically going to kill you.
Yeah, and it's shocking to see what people have had to deal with all this while in
Uh,
when stuff like this didn't exist, or folks who are unbanked in general had to deal with. So, hi Rohit, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shiladitya. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting us in.
No, thank you for making the time. We're really interested to talk to you, of course. And again, like I was sharing a little earlier, I think fintech companies are a predominant theme on Shunya One. So we're lucky to have spoken to quite a few fintech founders. And I would love to get your perspective on how you came to build SmartCoin. And for everyone listening in, maybe if you could start with a little bit of a background about your personal sort of entrepreneurship journey and what led
Hmm.
to building SmartCoin today.
Sure. So let me, I think, just talk about, I think starting from sort of the beginning. So I hail from Rajasthan, born and brought up in Kota, which is quite famous or infamous, for its IIT culture.
Of course.
So maybe that's one of the factors, I think so maths and science was always deep rooted. Grew up with that, ended up going to IIT Kanpur, did my bachelor's in computer science, had a pretty good time. And towards the end part, I started getting a lot of interest in the areas of, economics and finance as well. So when I graduated, I wanted to be in a place where I could do a mix of, coding and maths and economics and everything, right? So finance was the perfect place. So wanted to explore it a bit more. Ended up working with Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank in Mumbai. Had a couple of years over there. Really liked the field, and then I thought, why don't I go back and learn much more deeply about, what finance management is, and I mean, obviously dive deeper. So went back to school, did my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, uh, had a pretty good rigorous 2 years over there. And from there, I essentially wanted to work in the real world and, like get a much deeper flavor of the global financial market, what it entails. So I ended up joining Nomura in their London office. So, I mean, the idea was always that I wanted to go out, understand, what this whole financial sector was about. At that point, also India was, I think, the market was booming, but still just the level of development still not there, right? The markets are much bigger outside. There's a lot more liquidity.
Right.
There's a lot more advancement, right? So there's a lot to learn. So went there, stayed for about 5.5 years. I was a vice president. Uh, but what started happening, right? The few initial years were obviously very exciting, but after a certain point, the itch to come back to India and do something of my own, do something which is far more tangible and impactful, that started growing a lot. So
Mhm.
this was the period when I was spending, I think, more time uh, outside office on the weekend, just figuring what I wanted to do. Then I think what I was doing there. So
Right.
around that time, I started talking to a lot of friends of mine back in India. So my current co-founders, who were my friends then, they had been working with different tech startups. Uh,
Okay.
so there are three more guys, Amit, Vinay, and Jayant. We have been friends from early on. Like two of them are from IIT Bombay, one is from IIT Delhi, all around the same batches as mine. Uh, so we had known each other, but they had worked with different tech startups. And when I was thinking of coming back to India and starting my own venture, we actually started talking a lot. And then I took a sabbatical, spent some time, figuring deeper what do you want to do, and like
Hmm.
what is exactly that our venture should entail. So this is when I mean it became more and more clear to me that I wanted to be in India and do this venture. So I packed my bags, came back. Interestingly, it was 3 months before I was due to get my British passport, citizenship.
Oh.
Uh, so,
Huh.
so, so there was always, that sort of a thing that, why don't you stay for just 3, 4 months, get
Just
the
3 months.
passport,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I was like, there is always that temptation. There's always that next 6 months or 12 months. But I was very clear that I wanted to be in India and do this. So came back, uh, and that's how I think Smartcoin had its like very very early days. Even when we were starting this company, right? I think there were few things that we were very clear on. So one is that, like as I said, I think all of us had worked for close to a decade in the corporate world, right? I mean, all of us
Right.
had done, like jobs, the subject matter experts had grown through the ranks. So we understood how it works, right? And what was very clear to us, we wanted to do something far more impactful, far more India specific. And this was what back around 2016, when I think while the startups were taking off, but if you remember, most of the startups are still focused on the urban millennial segment, right? Because they were the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
adopters of most
Yeah.
businesses.
Just
Finance is one.
pre-geo in
Pre-geo,
a way.
exactly. Yeah, pre-geo,
Yeah.
pre-demonetization. That was exactly the
Yeah.
period when we jumped in. Uh, Pre-UPI as well, right? So all those
Of
things have
course.
happened obviously along the way. India Stack was there, which was obviously interesting. But so I think what we were clear in, especially I think all of us had grown in relatively mid to smaller cities. So we had been quite passionate about building for the emerging India, or as Bharat, like as everyone calls it these days, right? So that is something which was very, very clear to us. Also, what had happened is, my father, he used to work as a government bank employee. So he used to work in villages and adjoining towns. So we had all these guys, who were local farmers, or people like milkmen, small merchants, traders, who used to come to our home quite often. And they would tell, like banks were obviously quite bureaucratic, so they had a hard time getting access to credit from banks, which obviously ended up impacting their life a lot. So while I'd
Mhm.
like observed some of those things from the childhood, hadn't really thought much deeply on how this should be solved. But when we
Right.
started working on this venture, we actually figured that we wanted to do something impactful for them. That was very very clear. Second thing, which was
Right.
also very clear to us, is that we wanted to do something using technology, because we believe that will be
Of
the
course.
best way to solve for it, right? So again, this was pre-geo days. So obviously the data revolution has obviously accelerated much after that. But even then, it was clear to us that now smartphones are going into the hands of every Indian, right? I mean, it's not restricted to the top tier or the affluent folk. And then that is obviously allowing us to democratize other sectors. Like commerce was obviously there, education was coming up, and now people who are even sitting in smaller cities or even a rural area, they are getting access to the same quality of stuff which say an urban top tier guy is getting access to. So naturally expectations were higher. They were ready to also I think consume it, pay for it. But you need to, I think, modify and create the right products for them. uh, Finance is obviously one area which is a very fundamental sector, right, to keep
Mhm.
to make that impact. in the country, whether
Right.
you look in terms of the contribution to GDP or whether you talk in terms of the need in an individual's life. So we were very clear that if you are able to, bring a change in this sector and work for the mass market or the missing middle Indians, then there is a lot of potential that we can unearth down the line. So that is how I think that the initial
Right.
journey started, and then obviously over the last 4 years we have spent, our time perfecting how to provide the right financial products to this segment.
So
So,
what are
if
those
I can
products?
ask, yeah, what are the
Yeah.
products, and also what was the initial sort of version of it? Because today we know, lending is a feature, as the joke goes, but we now know a lot that can be done in this sector, right?
Hmm.
I want to pick on that one thing which you saw, that when you say pre-geo, right? What was it you saw that you could immediately solve with tech? Because I'm genuinely curious, what was the first
Hmm.
thing you could do
Right.
as a fintech company back
Correct.
then?
Right. Right. So see, from the top down, right, because this is something I'd been anyway, trying to understand for a while, even before I moved to India. So it was clear that India, especially when it comes to financial services, is underserved across the entire spectrum. That all of us know, right? Whether you pick
Right.
credit or insurance or savings or investment, like any vertical, people are obviously deeply underserved. However, once we started working on this venture, we spent at least 6 to 9 months on the ground talking to a lot of people from this segment, right? So every delivery boy who would come to our home, we'll talk to them in more detail. We would go out and talk to, say, your drivers. We will talk to small shopkeepers. We will talk to people who are working as field staff, plumbers, electricians, like basically all these profiles, and we try to understand, right? I mean, what's really holding them back, or what is something
Hmm.
that will help them to reach their aspiration. So what really stood out is that credit is the biggest problem in everyone's lives. So while everything else will also add up, but credit is something which really holds them back, which is obviously clearly makes sense, why it does and how it can solve. Uh, Incidentally, credit is also the hardest problem, right? So there's a reason, because credit is where you need to trust the people, give them the money, and it's
Exactly.
not easy.
Exactly. You have to
So,
be a
so
bank also, like, or you have to be a you ca-
bank or NBFC, yeah, exactly. I mean,
NBFC. Yes.
it's a highly regulated sector as well, right? So you have to make
Correct.
sure that you also have those things covered. Second thing, which was actually very interesting in building us our MVP, is when we talked to a lot of these guys, what we also found out, most of these guys, as I said, they're coming from relatively middle to lower income sectors, right? So typically, because of that, they don't have a lot of saving cushion, right? They don't always have that much stability in their lives. So if you look at their credit needs, that actually becomes very, very different from people like you and me. Like us, we
Hmm.
typically have always have some saving. So tomorrow, if say someone in the family falls sick and you need say 2,000, 4,000 rupees just to go to the doctor and purchase meds, it does not destabilize your finances. But for these guys, it makes their world go round.
Mhm.
Uh,
Hmm.
in fact, what was quite surprising to us when we went to and talked to a lot of delivery boys in Bangalore, what we realized, a lot of these guys every morning when they have to go out and make the deliveries, they just need 500 and 1,000 rupees to get petrol in their bikes so they can go out for the
Yeah.
day. Like I remember I was
Yeah.
talking to like an auto rickshaw driver in Mumbai, and he told me that these guys are getting like 1,000 bucks from a local lender because no one else would pay it, and it's difficult for them to carry their day otherwise. And this guy, at the end of the day, say he makes 400, 500 bucks on it, right? He gets back 1,400, 1,500. He'll pay this guy 100 rupees interest, so 10% a day. But he has to do it
Wow.
because without that, he cannot make the other 300, right? Which is important
Yeah.
for his life. And, like this guy will actually keep his Aadhaar and, PAN card and everything, right? Sort of as a
Yeah.
security and all of that.
Yeah.
Which is very, very surprising, right? I mean, people have to go, like, what ends do they have to go to make it work? And then we started talking to a lot of banks as well, and we realized that microcredit as a product is not something they want to do, because one, typically it's smaller ticket, so and banks are typically geared, to work with a lot
For
of
large.
manual processes and human involvement, right? So small ticket does not ever make sense for them. Anything below a couple of lakhs does not make sense for them, right? So most of these demand is being met by the informal sector only, and I think different estimates put it at anywhere between 100 billion to 500 billion dollar, which is a big opportunity, right? So we figured that this is a perfect area which we can solve through technology, right?
Right.
I mean, we can try to now all of these guys are connected to a smartphone. We can actually create technology to understand this and reach out to them and then serve this need. So this is how we figured on our initial product. Now the biggest challenge was when you were trying to, like as you said, you need the license. So
Correct.
we didn't have our own license early on, right? So we had to convince a NBFC or a bank to I think work with us on that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think we saw all sort of reactions to that, right? I remember early on, every banker I'll approach, so every guy will have their own story, right? Wherein they'll say, okay, I gave 5,000 rupee to my maid or to my driver, and then they ran away and they never came back. So the
Yeah.
guy I knew, they have not come back, and you are telling me you will give loans purely through a mobile app to anyone in the country. People are living 1,000 kilometers away from you, and without meeting them, without calling them, purely through technology. And you are saying your data-driven algorithms, so the machine learning algorithms, will find out who is good, who is not. I mean, it does not make sense, right?
No,
And
they just couldn't digest it probably. Like,
correct, right? Yeah. So I mean, it was. I mean, it's even very difficult even today when we talk to a lot of guys, right? So
yeah,
today, like we have got our customers as far as Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Jammu Kashmir, even Andaman Nicobar, we have like thousands of customers,
yeah,
which is obviously very
yeah,
difficult to fathom, right? Because I know it for a fact that if tomorrow someone from there does not pay us back, obviously I'm not going to take a ferry and go over there and to get my money back. That's obviously
yeah,
impossible. But we believe, right? I mean, the way that society is evolving, the way data is evolving, that actually is going to be the biggest form of collateral in the future, and that's the belief we had even at that point, right? While these guys don't have your traditional data, but all these guys are now spending time on smartphones, right? And tomorrow, if you are able to, like if you take an example, if you know two guys, you talk to them for an hour, you are able to find out, okay, this is a guy I like, he's very aspirational, he wants to do this, he wants to do this in life. Can you actually codify those things into data itself, so that that is
right,
able to ascertain who is good, who is not, right? And accordingly give him the credit. I mean, we want to democratize it for pretty much everyone, like who is a genuine guy, right? So
right,
those were the early days. We had a hard time. We had our own journey, explaining people. It was obviously difficult to get the bigger guys on board, the big banks. But we were able to find some, sort of NBFCs who believed in our vision, who thought, okay, this sounds, pretty exciting. And I mean, we are sitting at the cusp of something,
right,
something bigger.
right,
So we started working with them. Then we had our own data. Like obviously in the initial days, all of us founders, like the four of us, we were the support agents, we were the collection agent, we were the
of
disbursal guys,
course,
we were doing everything. This also gave us like sort of a first-hand, experience on this. Like there's so many stories, from those days, which helped us cement like our belief further. We had a hypothesis, but very early on we saw like very solid reaction. Like I remember one of the stories after we made it live, after a month, and like I told you, we wanted to build something which is completely digital, 100% digital, automated, back in those days as well, right? And something which is
right,
completely driven by data. So we never had any headquarters or meeting offices and all, right? But 1 month down the line, what happened is there was a guy who knocked on our doors, and we are running from home at that point. We were a bootstrap company. So he came from we are headquartered in Bangalore. He came from a place called Hassan, which is about 150 kilometers away. Uh, so he told us that he just came, like he was in Bangalore for some work, and he just came to thank us. The reason was that this guy was running a bike repair shop back in Hassan, and the way his business worked was he would obviously get guys with bad tubes. He will replace them. He said it like the business. I think like he's able to buy it you for say about 100 150 bucks. He's able to sell that in around 300 bucks, right? So he obviously had a good margin, but the issue is he was able to do say only 5 6 tubes a week because he did not have more capital than that. And
yeah,
whenever he tried to grow his business, the issue was most of his friends he could not borrow from because they were obviously never had spare cash either. And the local lender used to charge like 10% a week, and the penalty was like 20% a week, right? And obviously there's a lot of stigma associated with it. So the guys were obviously stuck there. Uh, he sort of discovered our app from the Play Store. He downloaded it. He started small, but because it allowed him to directly sort of revolve his credit faster, rotate his business capital, so he was able to sort of grew his business volumes to like more than 4 or 5 times just in a matter of 3 months. And that obviously then gave him a lot of spare cash. Now he was able to hire more guys and grow his
uh,
business. So I mean, the guy was very grateful. So I mean, these were the sort of stories which are very very interesting, for early days. and there's so many more. So that sort of cemented our
Wow.
belief, and then I mean, it obviously helped us. Uh, I mean, show to the investors as well that there's a solid market for this. And today, now we have almost 6.5 million plus users all across India.
Wow.
As I said, we have served more than 98% districts in India, more than 18,000 pin codes we have given loans to. So we have
Wow.
guys, who is like a army guy in Jammu Kashmir who is a borrower from us. He uses money to send money back home and take care of his cash issues. We have a guy who is running a grocery shop in Arunachal Pradesh, a hotel owner in Jangli Ghat, which is 60 kilometers away from Port Blair. So not even in Port Blair, but like 60 kilometers
Oh
away from.
wow.
So
Oh
these are
wow.
the guys
Yeah.
who are not discovering. So I mean that obviously has also coincided with sort of the data and the internet revolution that has happened, right? Because
Right.
when we were starting out, we thought we will be able to go to some of the mass market, but maybe for the people who are further down the order, we will have to think of something offline, which was against our vision. But we said, okay, we'll see, how the market works. But now the
Yeah.
fact is that everyone in the country, like in remotest corners, they are connected through internet. They are generating a lot of data, which just I think makes our vision I think much more closer. But yeah, this has been sort of the journey.
Interesting, man. So, I wanted to kind of like dig a little deeper into something which you touched on briefly a bit, right? But how do you, so what are the kind of factors you use before deciding whether or not a loan goes out, right? Like, again, you're using like, a number of different factors and you're using some AI algorithms and stuff like that. But what are the kinds of things that goes into, I get that some of it's going to be secret sauce, but what are the kinds of things that you can talk about, right, in terms of what you kind of look at?
And what do you actually even get from someone who is devoid of any history? What's the blank
Right.
slate for a blank slate guy? What do you actually get from the moment he downloads your app?
Right. So, see, like to give you a background on that, I mean, typically how credit underwriting works. There are typically three major components that you need to check for before you decide on the credit for a person. So, number one, I think the genuinity of the person, that the guy is not a fraudster or he's not, doing some ID theft or anything. So, the guy is basically what he is saying he is. So that's the most important thing. Especially in a digital world, right? Because now you're not meeting people, you're not, talking to them. So the chances of that happening are far more. The second thing is what's the intent of the person to repay the loan, which is called as your, sort of a credit score is also something which is a proxy. In fact, in today's world, with respect to banks, that's the predominant way that they judge, whether you are a good credit or not.
Right.
They will look at how your payment has been on your previous cards or loans, and that is a proxy for the future. But as you can imagine, this is a sort of a very catch-22 situation, right? Because they want to see like you have a good credit score to get a loan from them, but
Correct. But
you cannot
you
build a
don't have
credit
a
score
score.
if you don't have a loan, right? So most of these guys who are especially coming from middle or lower income sections, and especially such sort of emerging India segment, I would call, for them it's very difficult to sort of break out of that, right? So that was a big challenge. And the third part obviously is once you are confirmed on these two aspects, then it's about what should be the right loan product for them, what should be the right size and tenor and all of that, right? So now what we do, if I talk especially with respect to the first engine, which is a fraud and ID engine, like as I said, it becomes very, very important for us to understand what sort of things can happen in the digital world and have to prevent that upfront in our systems. Uh, and their technology has to evolve very, very fast, right? Because now, as you would also see, not just in fintech, but across sectors, I think you are seeing more and more data leakages happen, imposting happening, and all those things. So it becomes very important on how do you continuously stay ahead of the market on that. Like I'll
Right.
tell you an example. Pretty early on, like some of the people who were like most of the people who have always been coming to borrow from us, they have been really genuine, really aspirational guys. But every now and then you will hear some people who would realize, that there is a mobile app which is just giving money, without meeting you, without doing anything. So why not just go there and try our luck? And then there were some guys who will come, they'll try to get a loan. If they don't get a loan, they'll get his relative's identity, from his town, or they will try to get a different same. They will do all sort of funky stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
created that sort of technology even before I think when we were launching, right? Because we figured that this is something which will inevitably happen. what one interesting trend that we remember from then early days. So what happened? There was one guy who actually maybe tried all these things, and he realized he cannot break in. So what he ended up doing is he asked, I think, his wife to create a fresh identity, and as a fresh person, she took a loan from us. And what happened at the month end when when her EMI was due, he actually under his different identity, which is totally separate, took the loan from us, used that money to repay her loan,
Yeah.
and what we had in our system, we had a system wherein if you have a good credit profile, that also helps you to increase your credit limit over time, right?
Right.
Right.
So now her score is relatively positive, and when now this guy's payment is due, with her higher limit, she can pay for this. So in the process, both of them are
Yeah.
showing that they are
So they're
effectively
always
taking
sort
forward.
of, yeah,
Correct,
completing the loop for each other. Yeah.
correct, right. But at the back, there is a single balance sheet which is obviously not
Yeah.
working, right? So how do you
That
figure that? So, right. So those were then the new set of challenges that we encountered. But then we sort of and this is like just one example. There are like so many more examples we have seen as the country has evolved, especially I think with the complete
that's
digital approach.
basically an example of what like a lot of corporate houses do with their house of cards, like lending,
Yeah.
leveraging, right? It's the same
Correct, right.
thing.
I think the
But
only thing is
but
at
you
least with the
solved this, right? But
yeah,
you
yeah,
did
right.
solve this.
Yeah,
So
so this
you
is a
solved
problem
this
and
by some data which both of them
correct.
gave you, which correlated them somehow.
Correct, exactly. So now the key thing is how you so that's why the pattern identification, having things in the system which can automatically flag it, right? Because
Correct.
you cannot always think ki kya kya ho sakta hai. So you
Correct.
have to create
Correct.
systems which can actually at least catch those things. Once the red flag is
Correct.
raised, then you can obviously create rules. But more importantly, the system should be self-learning. They should be self-adapting, which becomes very, very
Correct.
important. So again, with a team like us, right? As I told, like me and my three co-founders, all of us are comp science graduates from different IITs, came with a decade of experience. So this is something that we, like as a team, were very clear on, and that's why I said, that we wanted to make data as the center and the tech is the center of whatever we're building, which is slightly
Right.
different approach to how typically financial services business are built, right? There are always some
Right.
traditional guys who have done finance and all. We were sort of totally different that manner.
Right.
But that helped us to, I think, bring this thinking very early on. Uh, so we're able to catch these patterns, and there have been like numerous more things that have happened post that. But this is what our engine is able to do, and today that's why like we are seeing almost 500,000 plus applications every month, and the systems are able to catch and weed out these guys very very early on without any manual intervention. So this is the fraud part, right? The
Nice.
second part is the intent part, and that is where the biggest bottleneck occurs, right? Because once you're at least able to establish that there's a guy who's genuine, and and you know that with a high probability he's likely to pay back, then at least you can democratize the credit part, right? Which is what we believed here. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि people who are earning above 1 lakh rupees per month, उनके लिए they are getting 5 credit cards and they are getting loans worth 5 lakh and 10 lakh and 50 lakh. But the people below that, people earning 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, they don't get any options at all. It should be कि ठीक है तुम्हें कम मिलना चाहिए, maybe because your risk is higher and all, but it should
Yeah.
not be that you
Yeah.
should not get anything, right? There should be a linear layer over there, right? Or
Correct. Correct.
at least a gradual one, right? So and to solve for that, this part was very important. As I said, credit scores were largely non-existent for the mass market population. It has been obviously growing much rapidly, but again, given the population of India, uh, most of the guys in the country do fall as a no file thin file borrowers, which makes it very difficult to serve them. What we were able to then uncover over there, right? We were able to see how their behavioral data and I think other sort of financial data could actually make a big impact over there. So now, taking an example, as I mentioned, some of these guys, typically when you go to the bank, what they'll ask you, okay, what your bureau score is, where are you working? Are you working in a relatively, cat A sort
Known
of a
company.
company, or
Yeah.
like a proper big business, and how much you're making? Uh, and because we're going after the mass market, obviously more and more of these things became difficult. Majority of the country is employed in semi-formal, informal sectors, so they don't get the
Yeah.
pay slip. They don't get money always directly in their bank account, so they won't have all those transactions. Always they might have bits and pieces, but they might not always have those recurring deep flows that typically you see with white collar segment. But I think interestingly, what is happening is today, if you look at smartphone of these people, they are able to trace a lot of other footprints. So, for instance, even with any segment that you pick, say delivery boy or a driver or a small shopkeeper, they will actually get a lot of SMSs relating to their financial transactions, right? So every time even a smaller income person makes a phone recharge, or he pays a Bescom utility bill, he will get something
Yeah.
for that. Right? So while that is not directly a credit score, but it still gives you some glimpse on how the guy is financially disciplined in his general right,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what sort of
Yeah.
behavior is he displaying there? You can again use other forms of data, for instance, like how his location data is varying. So again, for a shopkeeper versus a driver, you will hope to move that in a certain manner.
Yeah.
So you can obviously check for those traces. In fact, if you tomorrow say pick two small shopkeepers, and then I tell you there is one guy who is actually spending a lot of his idle time, just playing games on the phone, or just browsing through social media apps like TikTok, Hello, and the modern versions of that. And there's another guy who's actually using his phone to accept merchant payments through technology, through UPI. He is also using his phone to maybe learn English. He's using his phone to maintain a digital ledger. So you can clearly identify who's a more aspirational guy, who is a guy who would want money to relatively uplift his life. So it's not that the second guy is, not worth anything, but again the delta obviously becomes clearer and clearer, right? And we were able to tap into this sort of a behavioral signal to understand, like whether, like, we were able to map this data to sort of the default probabilities. And once you're able to do that, you were able to like remove the dependence on the traditional sort of variables to underwrite these segments.
And all of
uh,
this is from the phone data only, right? Because that's actually, so you're saying for someone who's starting off with no bureau score or whatever, you are literally just using phone data. And I remember this was it's a popular model which a lot of other fintech apps use, right? Where you need, like, you basically look at SMS data, you look at app behavior data, and so on. Is this because early on, it's a tangential question to this, is did people not worry about the whole privacy angle, which now everyone is sort of very conscious about back then, and that's why you could do this? Would you say that was a good moat you guys could break into, uh, and has it
so
become difficult since
no, no.
then?
So I would say, like, there are a couple of things, right, that we need to understand here. So data point is, like, data is going to be more and more important over time. That is clear, right? And the data privacy, data security is very, very important, no doubt about it.
Right.
So what is very important as a platform is for you to ensure a few things, right? One, making sure that you take care of data security. You don't sell data to other things, to like other companies
Yeah.
for their benefit. You don't try to make money of that. How do you build trust in the system? How do you be very transparent with your user? That is very, very important, right? So that is something we have been, again, as I said, cognizant of from day zero, and we have made sure that we are following those ethos across the organization.
Right.
That is one. So with respect to now coming to the second part, like, were people less concerned back then and now are they more concerned? I would say maybe on the margin, but what we have seen that the behavior remains roughly similar. Like, even back then, we had some customers who would say relatively be far more concerned, but the majority of the customers, like as I said, this is a segment wherein getting access to the right financial services is very, very difficult. So, and then as I said, like, there is no way to ascertain and basically understand their profiles except data. Like, every time you're asking them, even say not for a model, but every time a bank or any company asks them for their profile data, their identity details and all of that, there is always some kind of data which is being shared across. But I think it's very important for people to understand who they are sharing with, what their track record is, how many people sort of trust them. So obviously, when we're starting out, it was more difficult for us to convince our people that we are a company which is genuine. Like, we are not going to defraud you on your data or anything. And that's why, like as I said, while they're underserved across the entire spectrum, credit was our first choice, because credit is a piece where actually I am trusting him far more, right? So people also
Right.
realized, and then they also reciprocated that trust, that they understood that
Right.
the company needs access to my data, because without this, I end up obviously
Yeah.
going to the local lenders who are doing pretty much everything wrong, but I have no choice. So you're opening far more choices for them, and I think once that flywheel rotated, people were seeing sort of very strong positive testimonials, positive reviews on us, that sort of helped us. And then again, like in a journey, we make sure we are very transparent. We tell people why we are doing this, and to be honest, it also cost us some users. Like there's some people who do get more concerned; they might not come in the system. That's a very minor part, but there are some users. But we believe in the long term, it's very very important to build that transparency and trust with our segment. So I would say in a country like India, where 90% plus people still don't have access to the right credit, 90% people, like still don't get access to what they deserve. Trading off your data with the right partners is something which, I mean, left to the consent of the user, people are still choosing. So yeah, but the good thing is now I think regulators are also taking note. So the systems are evolving globally. I think we will see more and more regulations coming up. We have always been totally compliant on that, but I think as it obviously grows and builds further, this should be overall good for the ecosystem as well.
Rohit, so really interesting stuff about the conversation around data and privacy and all that kind of stuff, right? But I wanted to kind of go back a little bit to the aspects around, as you were mentioning, that you look at both what is the repayment intent as well as you're looking at what is the existing behavior and stuff like that, right? Do you think that there have been changes in terms of how y'all are looking at the market over the last year, and do you think that there has been a general change in the way that the market has evolved as well, right? I mean, like, or is it still like the same market that's just completely unexplored and you're just diving in? Do you think that the market is evolving as well in this stuff?
You mean over the last year particularly, or over the last?
Over the last few years, since
Yeah,
I
few
mean, like,
years.
I think COVID is one thing, but even prior to COVID, right? I mean, like, what have you seen as like an evolution of how the market that you're lending into is
Yeah,
kind of?
how people have sort of, and that's a good question, because now there are many fintech lenders. There are, like, this is a common model, business model, maybe not the primary one, but it's a part of it. So it's become a thing that you can download an app and get some cash, if I have to overtly simplify it. So yeah, how has that changed life for you guys as one of
Right.
the early folks who've done this?
Right. So you're right. I mean, when we were starting out, like as I said, we essentially focused on innovating across couple of dimensions, right? So one was because we realized, right, even in a research phase, that all these people are borrowing from informal market, and while there's so many things which is wrong with it, but still works because there were some things which any successful product should have. Like they did not have a lot of paperwork or sort of unnecessary hassle. It was much faster. So obviously those are the positive traits, and that's why we focused on creating the complete digital journey from day zero, when it was not even demanded. Right uh, today also I think most of the lending platform will promise you of giving money in a few hours, like minutes or
Yeah.
seconds is even today not the benchmark. We have been focusing on giving that in minutes from for 4 years back, right?
Oh,
And then
wow.
and that was the reason, right? We built everything which was completely digital, completely automated, so that people come on, they apply on the platform, and within a couple of minutes they get the money. In fact, again, some of our initial,
Wow.
sort of reviews were actually quite surprising from that regard, right? I mean, there were some customers, like I remember there was a farmer in near Jaisalmer somewhere, right? So this was a guy who took a loan from us, who applied for a loan from us, and he was approved, and we disbursed the money in his bank account, and then he like messaged us on WhatsApp. I think I was managing the customer care through WhatsApp at that point, and he was like, "Sir, मैंने तो देखा they said कि instant loan है, मुझे लगा बेवकूफ बना रहे होंगे, तो मैंने अप्लाई कर दिया और 2 मिनट पैसा ही आ गया, तो मेरे को समझ में नहीं आया पैसा दिया किसने, because I thought it's a scam or something."
Wow.
So there was that level of satisfaction. But so my point is, so that was one dimension wherein we worked, right? Making complete digital and automated and instant. So today we have seen obviously a lot of players coming to it. So rather than becoming like, it's still I would say, delight for the customer, but say relatively less so versus 4 years back, right? Because people are used to everything fast and instant now. The second bit, which we obviously worked a lot and continue to work on, is how do you use alternate data and machine learning to underwrite these people. That is something which is still, where I think still there's a long way to go, I think, for us and for the market as a whole. Uh, Because I think what has happened, while there are so many fintechs today, if you look closely, again, the problem is so a lot of guys obviously focus on the young professionals, relatively early sort of entrance into the job market and all of those things. But like if you look at people who are say serving your, small remote shopkeeper or a lower income blue gray collar factory worker and all these guys, I think there's still a lot of room over there. Like I would say, the entire market is still almost existent, right?
No, so that actually
Uh,
kind of interesting question comes to my mind based on that, right? The existing product itself, is it geared entirely towards working capital requirements, or can people use it as like payday loans?
So what we focused on, because like when we talked to these guys, their needs were also very diverse. They needed money, to take care of the medical emergencies, which was happening relatively frequently. They also needed money to say pay for their bills because there was always income cycle mismatch, right? Bill
Right.
24th and income is coming on 30th. There are month end issues. They needed to pay for kids' fees. They needed, especially shopkeepers, need to pay for their working capital or just shop renovation and all that, right? So there are a lot of diverse use cases, and India predominantly, I mean, even today now we're obviously getting digitized fast, but still there's a lot of cash economy. There is a lot of cash loan requirement. So that's why we started with a product which is completely unsecured, sort of a personal loan product. So you get the cash in your bank account instantly, then you can use it for a variety of use cases that you want to.
Okay.
So we've started with that approach, and I think even with our customers, we see that across the journey, the different sort of loan amount get used for a variety of that purposes. But obviously, the loan amount get bigger and bigger. There is a deeper use case of productive, asset purchase or growing the business. While the smaller tickets like sub 5,000 will get more used for medical emergencies, bill payment, just month-end cash crunch issues, right?
Right.
So there is some sort of a divergence automatically over there. Um, your other
But you
question,
don't
like,
you don't advocate, you don't necessarily need to know the intent of the cash, is what you're saying, as a personal
no.
loan, right? It's
So,
personal loan is
So,
use.
so we ask obviously people on why they are going to be used. In fact, this is also an interesting behavioral signal, right?
Yeah,
There are some people, like the genuine guys will always tell you a genuine reason, right? But well, there's some guys who might relatively not be that credit disciplined. Again,
right.
the sort of purpose that they'll tell you, that can also give a lot of data. So that's something, like every small behavioral data point also matters to you. So we do ask people, we know what they are going to use for, and in the future that will obviously help us, launch multiple products, which can cater specifically to
Right.
some of these needs. So that's why also that data helps us in further evolving our product. On the question of whether the market, like how has the market evolved in this period, so as I said, uh, people are obviously far more aware today, which is a great thing. COVID has only accelerated that trend, right? So now people are even far more digital, which is a great boon for companies like us, which is essentially using your digital footprints to understand you. So now
Right.
we have a lot
Correct.
more data to play with, right? I think 6 years back, I couldn't even have, sort of think about starting this business. Then we did, and then we learned. And now, but now we're in a very interesting place, right? We are at an inflection point where majority of your smartphone sales and data consumption is driven by the emerging India segment. So you can learn a
Right.
lot more about them. So market is obviously evolving in that side. With more penetration, there is obviously a lot more awareness. So people understand what they are getting into, why they are getting into it. That also helps you to improve your funnels and I think create better products for them. Like again, from early days, like I remember at that point, UPI was just coming in. So with a lot of our customers, we would obviously give them digital cash, directly in their bank account. But when the time to repay comes, then they were very confused. They were like, can we come to your office and repay? Or can you come to our
Through
home and
cash.
take the money? And I was like, that is exactly against, what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
So we had to like guide them on, how can you pay using NEFT and, through your bank apps and all. And we would like waste so much time on that. Today, I think we
Yeah.
have come a long way. We just increases the actual addressable market by a huge bound. Right? The total addressable market always has been big in India. As I said,
Right.
90% plus people are underserved. But out of those 90%, like can you serve 50% or 70%? That number has actually been going up, which I think is great for the ecosystem.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's
Thank
actually a great thing, right? Obviously, the whole boom of Actually, I mean, we've heard this on from multiple other folks in the fintech industry, where as a country we have actually evolved much faster than any other global nation of our size, right? I mean, the sheer innovation at the government level, at the infrastructure level for finance is amazing. But what you're saying is also the reality, right? In spite of that, there is still so much of the population still underserved,
Right.
uh,
No,
which means there's still a lot more to do.
right, but I think we are. That's why I think like the next decade is going to be one of huge possibilities for, especially for the entire mass market of India,
Hmm.
because now we have sort of the perfect trails uh, from the government and the regulator side. I think we have a very supportive ecosystem. So India Stack was there. Now we have account aggregator framework. UPI is obviously, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, growing by leaps and bounds. We have a lot many things which are in the play. So which sort of create a perfect infra to build things on. And then on top of it, now we have so many companies which are actually innovating for each of these niche segments, right? So again, there's so many companies working on digitizing, say, small shopkeepers' data, right? There are companies working with the gig sector, and the more this happens, the more innovation actually and better fintech products can be developed just on top of this data to, I think, serve these guys in a much better manner. So yeah, I'm really excited. I think for the next 5-10 years that we are going to see in the country.
That was going to be my next question, as let's say just some closing thoughts on what is it for. So the last 5 or 6 years almost for Smartcoin have been sort of this riding this first wave of, or maybe even creating the path of digital lending in the country, right? And evolving it there onwards. Obviously, the more data you have, the better, you said, your intelligence will be, and you'll evolve your products. But what are your immediate next uh, product goals, if I can ask about the tech you guys are building? What are some of the innovations coming up, which as a consumer we are likely to see in the next
Right.
year or so?
Right. So, as I mentioned, Shiladitya, early on, right? So, this segment, like what we have seen very closely, that credit is obviously one of the biggest gaps, right? And that the hardest one is as well, no doubt about it. But there are so many things which are associated around that, right? And that also in partly contributes to why the need for credit is there, or how they can overall have a much better financial health.
Mhm.
So and then that comes from multiple other products which are missing in their life. So for instance, because I mean insurance products, so just the way credit was not built for them, microcredit is the
Right.
right product, I believe, right, rather than the typical credit that you and I enjoy. Similarly, on the insurance side, we have seen, right, that these guys don't have enough savings to pay like $1,000 or $5,000 upfront to get the right health cover for them and their
Hmm.
families. So
Hmm.
again, you have to, I mean, tailor those products. Maybe create micro insurance product, create more personalized product to serve them, right? The needs of a shopkeeper will again vary substantially versus say someone who's a gig worker, and even there, across different age group. So how do you personalize those products? That is going to be important. Similarly, can you make them more aware? Can you make them more disciplined by giving them the right access to the right tools and technologies to help them save better, help them invest better? That is going to be very, very important. So what we are doing now is having basically created sort of the perfect relationship and trust with our systems, and better understanding of our users through the credit product. We are now leveraging that to sort of complete that feedback loop, and give them sort of a single place to take
Hmm.
control of their financial lives, right? So
Hmm.
you will see a lot more products coming out in the next 6 to 9 months, which will address each of these gaps in their lives, so that they can control all of their financial lives from a single app of ours. So,
Awesome.
yeah, we have already launched the insurance product. We are seeing pretty good traction on that. We are actually in the middle of launching some other products, so you will hear on that soon. But yeah, I think that that could be like really interesting to see how our customers interact across apps. Does it help them plan their lives in a better way? Does it reduce their dependence on sort of ad hoc credit for every small emergency or every need that they have? So while they obviously get access to it, but our eventual goal is that we are able to holistically sort of manage and help a customer move forward in their lives. So yeah, I think hopefully, I think we are getting nearer to it every passing day. Uh,
Awesome.
okay.
Awesome. Thank you for that vision, Rohit. And of course, being one of the early platforms out there, I'm sure we'll see a lot more innovation from you guys in new things like you just shared. Given our audiences also like folks in the startup ecosystem, you want to do a shout out to where people can reach you? Are you available on Twitter or LinkedIn? If they want to reach out, are you hiring? Anything like that to sign
Right.
off?
No, sure. So we are definitely hiring. I think we're always hiring, and there are a lot more
Always.
exciting products in the kitty, as I told, right? So we are
Yeah.
looking for good engineers, good, I think, good and passionate. Actually, more importantly, who are passionate about making an impact on the mass market Indian population. So we're looking for folks in product, folks in strategy, folks in engineering. We have a very active, job listing page on LinkedIn. I'm also quite active there, so you can directly, I think, go to the Smartcoin page or my page, and on Twitter as well. You can tag the Smartcoin page, and you can reach out to us through any of these mediums. Would love to hear, I think, from more people, whether it's about hiring or whether you have any any questions or any suggestions on the kind of work that we are doing. So always happy to interact.
Awesome, great.
Awesome.
Also, I'll just quickly remind everybody, please do a rating or review wherever you're listening to this. It does help us. Also, tell somebody if you enjoyed this conversation with Rohit, that, hey, they can listen to this on Shunya One, other conversations too.
Yes, and perfect. Thank you so much, Rohit, for that very insightful chat. I think it's always amazing, like I said at the start, to hear more about the amazing fintech ecosystem in the country, and especially given what you shared with us today. I mean, you guys obviously saw a lot of the phases of it, so I'm really keen to see what comes next, and I can only imagine you'll make the money down to seconds. I don't know. You'll give people money probably before they even realize they need it.
Yeah,
So
no,
we'll wait for that day.
no, absolutely, Shiladitya. Thanks a lot to you and Amit, for hearing our story and for your great questions. We're really looking forward. I think we'll be chatting up again once we have, uh,
Yes,
once we've reached that stage where we are able to anticipate and I think tell people this is what you need and this is how you should do it. But we're looking forward to that.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank
Thanks
you
a lot.
so much.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I V M.